Hi everyone, so I have kids all around me making this video, but I thought I better do it, and honey, don't do that please. I better do it anyway, just because, you know, I guess it's authentic, and but also I may run out of time later. So, anyways, I'm trying to prevent my little baby over here from touching the computer. Okay. So I'm making this video to answer some questions cryptic pregnancy mamas were asking. The first question is, how did you know the day you conceived was the day you conceived? Okay, so I'm going to be also talking about muscle testing a lot in this video, and I do plan to make a video about that as well. It's just, you know, it takes time to make videos, especially when you have kids around. Well, with all of my pregnancies, for me, it was very clear when I conceived, because I would always feel a pulling sensation in my womb. And it was very distinct, very clear, pulling sensation in the womb. And it kind of felt like, something was pulling on the side of my uterus. That's the baby, you know, burrowing inside the wall of the uterus. And that process, you know, that beginning process of the little baby burrowing inside the womb, was sort of when I started to measure, you know, when I knew something was happening, when the baby's pulling down my shirt, that I knew something was happening inside my womb that was physical, you know, that I had a physical conception of a baby, and that happened with all three of my pregnancies. And my last two pregnancies, my last two babies were the cryptic babies. So my baby has just signed out of my computer here, so I have to sign back in. So okay, as usual, these are not very professional videos, but they are rather lively. Okay. The second, and then basically just to, you know, just to sort of reconfirm and stuff, I use a kinesiological type of testing called muscle testing. And it's basically where you test the body's energy fields, you ask the body questions, and it's a widespread known alternative type of testing, which I do in my practice. And that's how I also just sort of double, triple, quadruple confirmed that, you know, when the babies were all my babies were conceived. And plus I had that very distinct symptom, which was the pulling sensation on my womb. I always knew that's when a baby was taking hold, taking root in my womb. The second question is, did you test negative on your pregnancy test, both urine and blood tests? For my first baby, my first cryptic pregnancy, I tested negative on home urine tests for 3 months. The 3 months of the pregnancy. And I finally went and got a blood test around 3 months. It was positive, so I went and got an ultrasound, and they said the baby was 6 weeks, around 6 weeks younger than she actually was. The midwife I was with said she must have just been small, and smaller than the average that they used to measure on the ultrasound. But I learned later, when I had my other cryptic pregnancy, that it can also have to do, they're smaller, but they're just growing more slowly. But anyway, it taught me that I knew when I was pregnant, and I should trust that. And she would have been considered preemie, like slightly preemie, because according to the doctor's measurement, I gave birth at 37 weeks to my first cryptic baby, but the midwife said that there was absolutely no signs of her being 37 weeks She was full term. So they checked her little feet, the little lines on her feet and everything, and she was full term. Because the real measurement was that she was 44 weeks. I gave birth to her at 44 weeks, not 37. So, yeah, around 6 or 7 weeks off the ultrasound was. And then for my second cryptic pregnancy, I had negative urine tests, both at the doctor's office and at home, for 5 months. And then when I finally got a positive urine test, I had both negative blood tests and urine tests for 5 months. And then when I finally got an ultrasound, finally got a positive urine test at home, they gave me an ultrasound, and I was 5 months pregnant by that time, and I had a bump. I had a clear baby bump. I had movement. I mean, I'd been pregnant twice before I knew I was pregnant, and they did the ultrasound, and they saw this little speck on the screen with a heartbeat, and they said that I was 5 weeks pregnant. I was like, that's ridiculous. I'm not 5 weeks pregnant. And then I asked an obstetrician and a doctor separately, like way later. They told me that they found a heartbeat at 5 weeks, and they said medically there is no heartbeat at 5 weeks. The fetus doesn't even have a heartbeat at 5 weeks. So I was like, yeah, I told them I was much further along than they thought I was. After I had that ultrasound where they told me I was 5 weeks pregnant, I just left, and I never went back. I just been through so much stress with that whole thing, and I decided just to sort of take care of myself. And I didn't see a midwife again until May. So, which was, at 5 months pregnant with my third one, it was around December, and I didn't end up seeing a midwife again until May. And she was born in August. So, but I'm an alternative practitioner. I was seeing another kinesiologist. I was writing to my midwife friends for advice and stuff. But yeah, it was quite an adventure. A lot of growing had to be done. A lot of grounding. A lot of clearing of negative feelings of worthlessness, lack of self-worth. Came up. So at that time, had to grow a lot at that time. Girls, I hope you're. Okay, honey. Well, be nice over there, please. Okay, so the third question is, did you get an ultrasound? If so, was it negative? Okay, so I explained the ultrasound. Did you feel the baby move a lot? You know, it's funny, with my first cryptic pregnancy, she didn't move, like, even though she showed up on the ultrasound sooner and everything, she didn't move almost at all. My first baby was so active and bouncing around, and you could see the waves in my belly and everything, and I even could feel her pulse at one point because it was reverberating off the side of my womb, so I could actually feel her pulse one time on the side of my womb, but she was like, I'm here, and my second baby was my first cryptic baby. She barely moved at all. Sometimes I was kind of worried, but she was fine. I always checked in with my intuition, and I was going to see a midwife, and sometimes I would ask her, please just move once, and she would go, and I'm like, okay, maybe one more time. She's like, you said once. So she was very quiet. But I grew enormous with her. I was enormous. My belly. Just consistently. With my second cryptic pregnancy, she was so active all the time. She felt like this in the womb. She was like, she felt like she was spinning in the womb. And even like when I was having my negative ultrasounds and I was getting all this crap from the medical field and stuff, I even woke up at night and I could feel her tapping on the side of the womb. She was like this little fetus at the time, like 8-week, 10-week-old fetus, but she was tapping on the side of my womb and I could feel it with my hand. And yeah, so, but she was like a little storm in there from the beginning. The fifth question is, what were your symptoms through your first, second, and third trimester? Okay, so with my first cryptic pregnancy, I was very, very sick for the first 3 months. 3 or 4 months, I was like throwing up and nauseous all the time. I was also going through a lot. And then I felt really good for the second trimester and the third trimester. I felt really good. I was done. I was so huge. I was like, okay, anytime, baby. She ended up coming at 44 weeks. Spontaneous labor. I was unmedicated labor. And it was unassisted. No midwife at all. Just at home by myself with my husband. My husband caught the baby. With my second cryptic pregnancy, I would get dizzy. I definitely had cravings and like different food that I would get obsessed with or different food I didn't want. But in terms of like intense nausea and stuff, not really. I had like the smell thing where if you can't stand certain smells or you get really sensitive. Girls, you're being. Yes, it is me. Yeah, I'm making a video. You get really sensitive to smells, etc. I did get that for my second cryptic pregnancy, but it wasn't like intense nausea. I would get dizzy. A lot of the symptoms with my second cryptic pregnancy were like, the pulling sensation in the womb when she was conceived, and then the fullness in the womb, and then I did get some intense cravings sometimes. For a while, I would eat like the same thing for dinner for weeks. One time, I ate only seafood for 6 weeks. I wouldn't eat anything else, and vegetables. And so yeah, I did have symptoms, but they weren't like the intense nausea I had and stuff with my first and second. The second trimester with my third baby, my second cryptic pregnancy. I can get to that later. I think there's a question here that covers that. What I'm going to say. And it says, if you don't mind me asking, how much weight did you gain? I do not mind you asking that. I think with my first cryptic pregnancy, I gained like 30 pounds, I think. And with my second cryptic pregnancy, I think I gained around 30 pounds by the end, maybe more. She took a long time. My second cryptic pregnancy took a year to cook in there. So, Quill's too. Yep, she's up on the table in front of me. Did you have prodromal labor during the months leading up to the giving birth? Okay, so with my first cryptic pregnancy, I did have Braxton Hicks and the usual, but a week before she was born, a week before I went into active labor, I had consistent contractions, non-stop contractions. They were kind of light, but they were exhausting. I could sleep through them, but then it would just start again the next day, and I literally couldn't do much. I had to be in bed for a week, and then of course, the moment I decided to go out and do something, that's when she decided to come. And then for my second cryptic pregnancy, my third baby, I started having those contractions. I was still very small, like my belly was still very small. At the time, I didn't know that pregnancies could go beyond, the longest pregnancy I had at that point was 44 weeks. I didn't know they could go, beyond that, or much beyond that, I should say. So it was around 9-10 months, and I thought I was going to have a preemie, actually. I started those contractions early, and all right. So I have to take my baby off. Okay. All right. Sorry, ladies. Okay. I started having those like light contractions, and I starting like, well, I guess it was starting around 7 months pregnant or something. I thought I was gonna have like a preemie. And so I was muscle testing for myself. I was muscle testing like different herbs I should take to help, help things move along. And I had I ended up having nonstop contractions for 6 weeks. And I took blue cohosh, and in those 6 weeks when I was having the contractions, she was all tucked in for so long, and then during those 6 weeks, those contractions like massaged my womb and worked out my womb, so it became strong and less lax, because I had just had my second baby, and it just came out more. Like my womb just grew in those 6 weeks, and then they stopped. They stopped after 6 weeks, and that's when I kind of went through my like. I noticed women will go through this like at some point. It's cryptic pregnancies. I went through my meltdown. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm like. At that point, I was like already 10 months pregnant, and I didn't know what was going on. I felt like the baby was okay, so that's when I called my friend the midwife, and that was the first time I saw a midwife in many months, and yeah, the baby. Let's see, that was the contractions stopped in May, and. I just became enormous after that. Like, before that, I was so tiny, but I felt all the growth on the inside, but then after all those contractions, I just kept growing and growing and growing. I was gargantuan by the end of a year of pregnancy. I eventually gave birth to her at 52, 53 weeks. Spontaneous labor, unmedicated labor, unassisted at home, with my husband. So they stopped in May, the contractions stopped in May, and then and then I went into labor in August. Yeah, so that was kind of like my experience with my second cryptic pregnancy. Don't touch the computer, please. So yeah, so this is how many weeks were you pregnant for both pregnancies? My first cryptic pregnancy was 44 weeks pregnant when I gave birth, and then with my second one, I was 52 to 53 weeks pregnant. What is your suggestion in seeking medical treatment? My biggest suggestion in seeking medical treatment is to check in with your intuition about it. The medical field can be extremely. It can either be helpful or extremely detrimental to women in general, but for labor, for pregnancy, labor, all these kinds of birth things, it can be extremely damaging to women. It functions within a very limited understanding, a box basically, and a certain type of, certain dogmatic sort of understanding of testing, and the problem is women are so, you will fall off there. Women are so incredibly reliant on the medical field to tell them what to do, and there is a sort of disconnect between our bodies, our babies, our intuition, and we rely on other people to tell us what to do, and it creates this enormous disconnect over generations of women. So the number one thing I would say is to check in with your intuition about who to see. And the midwife one time suggested to me, and I put this in another video, she said you could, family doctors, independent family doctors can be, might be good to go see. Alternative midwives, like home birth midwives, are good to go. Maybe good to go see for these situations. And I'm trying to think. Oh, and then you could go the other route, you know, just go to a hospital. But I would suggest not an emergency room. They're much too busy, and they tend to be more cutthroat than usual. Unless you're really feeling like intuitively that's what you should do, I strongly suggest not doing an emergency room. Or like a walk-in clinic kind of a thing, because they're just more, got so many patients, like they're more under stress, they're more cutthroat than usual. I was actually medically raped in an emergency room. It's just not a good idea most of the time, especially for pregnancy type situations. Okay. So one thing to really understand about the medical field, I said this before, is that it's a very small aspect of physical wellness. It doesn't even really incorporate emotional and spiritual wellness. The problem is it kind of rules with an iron fist through all its funding. It's able to really control the masses in a way, and so it's become almost as God in our society, and it has asserted and inserted itself, starting in Europe, especially the obstetric practice was started by men, and they were started by men after all the women were murdered, or had gone into hiding, because the Catholic Church had condemned all these witches, who were midwives, herbalists. They were basically going on witch hunts and murdering women, and 100 years of that going on, and then finally they were like, oh, we better stop this because we have no one to take our wives to when they go into labor. And so the men decided that they would create their own practice of childbirth practice, and the practice of obstetrics was actually built on the foundation of this era, right after, like 100 years after the burning times, after women were murdered on a daily basis. They set up these hospitals, like the first obstetric hospitals in Europe were filthy. These men had no idea what they were doing. And so in Europe, it started to become this, like, they started to tell women that, like, it was dangerous to give birth because women were getting these incredible infections in these hospitals. And the men had no idea what they were doing. It was actually a woman who discovered microorganisms. It was a woman who discovered microorganisms and started saving these women's lives. Saying we have to wash our hands between patients. We have to wash, our surgical equipment between patients. That was a woman who figured that out. A nurse, because at the time women could not become obstetricians. Women could not attend women in birth as the main professional. So actually, the obstetric. Sorry. And so it became this thing in Europe. Like they just decided to drive home this lie, basically, that childbirth is dangerous and it's fearful because you could die, you could get an infection. But in fact, it was the men who created that reality in a healthy environment in which midwives thrived, in which women's circles thrived. Women were able to give birth in an environment, when women were learning from thousands of years of passed down knowledge from woman to woman, from midwife to midwife, the herbs to use, the woman's wisdom, the understanding the woman's wisdom. Childbirth was actually not considered a dangerous thing. It only started becoming a dangerous thing in Europe when these women were murdered, and then the men built these obstetric practices without any knowledge of childbirth, and women began to die in childbirth, and that became the legacy that the Western world's practice of childbirth was built on. And then when the Western world started to colonize the rest of the world, they passed on this trauma to the rest of the world. Which, okay, so, I went off on that because the medical field is based, a lot of people are conveniently left ignorant of the history of medical practice. Medical practice has its place, certainly. It has its practices that have helped save people's lives and improve things, but at the same time, there is this campaign to, it's not just that they do their practice, there's this campaign to cut women off from their knowledge, their inner knowledge, and history and legacy of childbirth, childbearing and childbirth. Because what I just told you is the history, is the actual history of obstetric practice. And to this day, medical rape is rampant, including the cutting of women's vaginas without asking them, without their permission. They're called episiotomies during birth. For C-sections, this is rampant, especially in America and the rest of the Western world. Especially in America, we have the highest mortality rate among developed nations. We're a superpower. We should be, logically have the best of the best. But the fact of the matter is, there is so very much an agenda to keep people reliant on it. So to be sort of this video is already 30 minutes long, but I'm trying to do this with the kids running around screaming. But anyway, hopefully it's working out here for you guys. That, especially when it comes to the medical field, and to everything, but the medical field has an agenda. And not that everyone is consciously part of that agenda, or there aren't good doctors, there aren't good obstetricians. It's just that it's very important to be very aware of this constant agenda. Okay, I have to go for a minute. Hi everyone, so I'm nursing the baby here. She was falling apart. She was not going to let me finish the video without some chi-chi here. So, okay, so the question that I was on here, what would you like to say to all cryptic pregnancy mothers out there? Well, a lot of things. And they come up throughout my videos. But the number one thing I think I say all the time is that you're going through this process for a reason. And I know that there are different outcomes. Some cryptic pregnancies never complete. Some women find out that it's something else. Some women miscarry, in different ways. Some women will have what's called a missed miscarriage, where they absorb the baby, or they'll miscarry it by releasing the baby. Some women discover that they've gotten pregnant several times over a period, and so there are many different situations that go on with these experiences, but to know that you're going through this experience for a reason, and the greatest reason, the greatest and most noble and powerful reason is because everything is trying to come back into a balanced state, with women. Women have been cut off from our legacy for so long of intuitive life, our connections to each other, our legacy, our passed down knowledge from mother to daughter about healing, about childbirth, about womanly rights, And these experiences can help us if we don't try to escape them, but we take them on, and we rely on our intuition, and we exercise our intuitive sense in the process. We begin to open doors for ourselves, and we work together with, a higher love to open up doors within ourselves, in the world, to have our questions answered. When we do the work that's necessary, which is the internal work, the spiritual work, the exercising of the intuitive sense, that's when we grow. That's when we develop ourselves. And my biggest thing is don't run away. Don't run away. You're going through this for a reason, and the farther you try to run away from it, the more it's going to chase after you, because it's your destiny. It's your destiny to go through these experiences, and whether or not they were supposed to happen exactly the way they happen, who knows? But here we are going through these experiences, and we meet teachers along the way, women like me who've experienced them, and she's sleeping. And we grow and we learn, and we become healers ourselves. I had to put my phone down because I had to see the next question. But who told you it was cryptic pregnancy? At what point in your pregnancy did you find out it was cryptic? I didn't know that I was even going through a cryptic pregnancy with my first cryptic pregnancy. It took me a while to sort of put all the pieces together. It wasn't really until my second cryptic pregnancy, and it wasn't even until I was 10 or 11 months pregnant before I found the websites and learned what a cryptic pregnancy was, and realized a lot of things about my first and second pregnancies. Another thing that I would say with the other question, what I would like to say to cryptic pregnancy mamas everywhere, is don't get caught up in cryptic pregnancy dogma. Dogma is a curse in anything. It's just, it doesn't allow for growth. It's stagnant. It doesn't allow for the natural human, discovery of ourselves ever more every day. There's a lot of dogma out there about everything, including cryptic pregnancy. And it's just, the cryptic pregnancy experience is a very deep and profound experience for women, and to dogmatize it and to make it have rules according to one person's interpretation is very detrimental to our health. You may certainly have your own viewpoints and experiences. I certainly express my own opinions all the time about it, my own viewpoints and learned experiences about it. But I express them not to enforce them on anyone, but to just tell my story and tell my experience. And certainly if somebody else has another experience, I ask them. I'll even say that doesn't really make any sense to me. I don't see how that is really really possible, or logical. But it's not I'm very careful not to enforce certain beliefs and certain understandings on people. Like, you're not allowed to be part of the group, or you're not allowed to express this or that. Because this is a growing and learning experience for all of us. We are all on this journey together to restore the legacy of women, the connectivity of women, the support system of women, the healing of women, the knowledge, the wisdom, the womanly rights of birth, in rites of passage with ourselves, our bodies, our minds, our children. Excuse me. I think that's all the questions. Let me just check. Yeah, I think I've covered everything. So it's a little more quiet in this video. I hope the other video is clear. I know it's a little loud in the background, but I'm a mama, and that's how it is sometimes. I hope that it was helpful, and sending all of you love, and I certainly send all of you love and prayers all the time, so that you can find your way, the doors will open for you, that you can discover yourself more and more. Because as A Course in Miracles, a book that I read, a spiritual book I read many years ago, as A Course in Miracles says, we are the ones that we have been waiting for. And I pray that you guys that we all find ourselves, the deep intuitive reality of who we are. And this is what cryptic pregnancy is about. This is what pregnancy is about, but the cryptic pregnancy experience forces you there, forces you to look deeper. So, thank you so much for listening, and I hope that it was helpful. Okay, bye-bye, mamas.